Hello there folks, it is Toby from TIJ Music and welcome to a new album review. Yes, an album review of fresh material. In fact, that fresh that it only came out yesterday. Of course, I'm talking about the big new album by Irish sensation Westlife. It is their first album for 9 years since Gravity in 2010, and that is Spectrum, the 2019 release from Westlife. They got back together last year. It's been 13 months since they got back together. October 2018, they announced they're getting back together. Woohoo! And going on a stadium tour and also producing an album. It's also their first album under Universal and the Virgin EMI name. And again, apologies if I'm looking at my notes. These are my notes there. And basically, the name Spectrum was chosen to kind of convey the various shades of personalities and perspectives that all the band have got, but that it still gels together really nicely. The group collaborate as well with long-time collaborators, the likes of Steve Mack, of course, who produced tracks like World of Our Own, Queen of My Heart, and What Makes a Man Again, some fantastic Westlife staples. And I think that some of these tracks will become Westlife staples. To not ruin my thoughts and kind of have a spoiler of what's going to come, it's not an excellent album, but it's certainly a good album. It's really got some really great tracks in it. There's a few tracks that I think walk by the wayside and I'm not too interested in, but the large majority and the vast majority are very good tracks. Now, of course, we've got new collaborators from from people in the music scene today. Ed Sheeran, James Bay, what's his name? Ryan Tedder as well, the One Republic lead vocalist. Never heard of him, but again, he's the lead vocalist of One Republic, so very good. And a few more collaborations, which I'm sure I'll talk about later. So a lot of collaborations from those who are really prominent in the music world, and their collaborations with these artists have only helped the album, only helped Westlife to excel in what they deliver. A little bit like, funnily enough, I went to see the Carpenters last night. Don't worry, I didn't go and see Karen Carpenter in a grave. It was a tribute band. But something the Carpenters did very well as Westlife, is took music by other artists that was written by other artists and really do it well, and really convey it well, and really do it justice. And that's exactly what Westlife have done for over 20 years now. Of course, their first album was released back in 1999, and of course we are now 20 years later. The anniversary of Swear It Again, their first single, was April this year, and of course the anniversary of their first album was 20 years ago as well. So very nice to see the group back together, and it is definitely a good album, as I've just said. It was released yesterday on the 15th of November 2019 on CD, digital download, streaming apps, so like Spotify, Apple Music, etc., as well as on vinyl record. And it might be one I get on vinyl. I'm into vinyl quite a bit at the moment. I might get it on vinyl at some point, but I think it's $15.99 at the moment, and I'm quite alright with it on my iPod, really. That's all I need it on at the moment. But it's certainly a very good album. But apart from that, I think that is all I've got to mention about the background. So let's talk about the tracks. And the first track is one that we've heard for a while now. Certainly those who listened to it first off in January when the first single was released, and that is Hello My Love. And if you haven't watched one of my album reviews before, we have a rating system, and I rate every single track to produce a verdict and a final rating of an average of those tracks. If you're wondering why I'm rating these tracks one by one, there is a reason for it. It's very important at the end of the video. But for the first track, I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10. An 8 out of 10 I gave this track, and that is Hello My Love. Now, it's a track I've heard plenty of times now. A, on the radio. B, of course, it's been out since January as a single. A really long run up, if you think about it, releasing a track in January this year as a single, and then the album coming out in November. It's a really good track. The first track actually played on the 20 tour, which I went and saw back in June, and I've also got a review video on the channel for that, so if you want to go and watch that, please do, but make sure it's after this video. And it's a great track for radio, and it certainly goes with the old and new sound narrative. The band wanted to have their old sound, but a new sound as well, and kind of blend it into the two. They didn't want to be a new band necessarily, but more like a Westlife 2.0. And keep that sort of old sound, but modernise it. Because bear in mind, 9 years in music is a very long time. I mean, you've only got to consider sort of years ago, 70s to 80s. There's a massive shift. And even though I'm not really up with music today, because Westlife's a real rarity for me in terms of people I do listen to. There's Westlife and a few other artists, but generally I'm more of a 70s and 80s fan, but I do love Westlife. And music's changed a lot in those 9 years. Even I consider that as somebody who's not really much into the music. But yeah, it just really goes with that old and new sound narrative. And I think it's got that stadium tour design in mind. I think it works perfectly, seeing it live myself. And it's a very good opener to the album, a very good vocal performance from all of them. And it's great to see, and a really nice balanced track. And that is an 8 out of 10. That's then followed by the second single of the album, and this is a 7 out of 10. A little bit lesser than Hello My Love, but still a good track nonetheless. And that is Better Man, more of an acoustic track. And a lot of the tracks on this album are more ballad, slow tempo, which works perfectly for me. Those are the Westlife tracks that are my favourite. You've got the up-tempo ones that are great as well, but ultimately the best Westlife tracks, in my opinion, are the ones that are kind of either slow tempo or build up. And, you know, you've got the tracks like What About Now? That's one of my favourite Westlife songs. It's a beautiful song. And then, of course, you've got the slower ballads like You Raise Me Up and stuff like that are perfect tracks. And, of course, Better Man is certainly an acoustic track as well. Written again by Ed Sheeran. I apologise, I didn't say. The first track through to the fourth track is written by Ed Sheeran, or at least contributed to by Ed Sheeran. You can definitely tell it's a Sheeran sound, but I think that we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about the next track. But this was written by Ed Sheeran, Gibson, Steve Mac and Wayne Hector. Wayne Hector, another early contributor of Westlife as well. And when this was first released as a single all the way back in March, I wasn't that keen on it. I don't know why, but it's certainly grown on me. It does sound a little restrictive, hence why it's only 7 out of 10. I feel like the vocal performances of all of the males in the band, it's just there's something not there, and I can't quite pinpoint it, but to the classic Westlife tracks, it's just something that's not there. It's just a little bit restrictive to me, but it's still a good album track, and I think that's what gives it a 7 out of 10. And then we've got, which arguably, and yes, it's the joint best rating on the album, that's a 9 out of 10, and this is a fantastic track. It's really back to the Westlife classic era, and as I've said, one of the best tracks on the album. This is My Blood, written again by Ed Sheeran, Hector and Mac. And one criticism of the album, before we get into the good stuff, is that particularly this track does sound like an Ed Sheeran track, and it's kind of got that vibe a little bit sometimes. Like, it sounds a little bit like a cover album, but I think that's lessened. I think that was more of an observation when I first listened to the tracks. Listened to My Blood, I think, about 3 or 4 times now. I think I've listened to the album 3 times in the last 24 hours to get a gist of it. But yeah, this track in particular did sound very Sheeran-like. Again, not surprising because he's wrote it. I'm not saying that's a surprising fact, but there's just not much variation. But I think after listening to it for a few times, I'm chuffed. It's a really good track. It's a fantastic track. Mark, that's not this track, never mind. Yeah, it's a very good track, released on the 25th of October, the 4th single from the album. We'll move on to the 3rd single, which I was just about to talk about then, a little bit later on. And I think compared to the second track, it allows a lot more vocal flexibility. And as I said earlier, it's closest to the first 4 tracks, to the real Westlife formula that worked well before, and particularly excellent vocals from Mark. Absolutely fantastic. We now move on, which I was going to talk about earlier, and then I thought, no, we're still on the 3rd track. Calm down a bit. The 4th track, this is Dynamite. Again, Ed Sheeran, Steve Mac and Andrew Wyatt contributed on this one. And this is the first real display, I think. There were inklings of it on the first 3 tracks. This is the real first display of that clear modernisation of sound. You know, the kind of sound effects, I'm not too up with that, but the kind of sound effects that are used are very modern. You hear them a lot on the radio with a lot of the tracks. So it's clear they've modernised in that sort of aspect, which is something I don't particularly like. But because they have to cater for the masses, what can I do? But funnily enough, Mark has production credits on the Midnight Mix, which is actually a bonus track. A Japanese bonus track, believe it or not. Again, baffling, but there you go. I haven't actually listened to that, but I thought that's an interesting fact. I'll definitely go and listen to that at some point. It certainly grows in stature, this track does, over the length of the track, which is certainly clever. It kind of starts as a kind of up-tempo but slow track, and then gets really vibrant towards the end, which is great to build a bit of atmosphere. And again, Mark's vocals are absolutely excellent. So now it's the 5th track, which I wasn't particularly chuffed with, and this one is Dance. It just hasn't got the old Westlife formula, which a few of these tracks haven't. And I'm not saying that all of these tracks have got to sound exactly like the 1999 album, which was Westlife. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that it doesn't fit for me in some aspect. This one was written by Closer, who is an American songwriter, but couldn't find any more about Lucas Closer. I think it's Lucas. Ryan Tedder as well, who is the lead singer in One Republic, and then Smith and Skelton also contribute here. Now, Shane's voice, I think in particular, the kind of vocals and the techniques he used clearly shows how this track is modernised, and I think that's something that you'll only kind of understand, and I'm using kind of a lot here. I need to kind of rub that one out of the system. Yeah, I think that Shane's vocals in particular show that the sound is modernised a lot from Westlife, and again, it's something I'm not a big fan of. But what is typical is that Mark again plays a big role, and it's not the best track, but what I have to say about all these tracks is that they are well produced, well written, and they sound slick. And I think that it is going to be a radio staple over time, particularly this one, just because of the vibrance it's got and a bit of the up-tempo, and it's similar to a lot of the tracks that are on the radio in terms of that aspect. It might grow on me over time, but this one is only a 7 out of 10. I think I didn't mention the Dynamite rating either. That's an 8 out of 10. So, yeah, I forgot that one. And then we move back to real form, I think, with the 6th track. This one is the 5th track, 5th and final track, written by Ed Sheeran and Mac. It's an excellent track, in my opinion. I don't really want to know what it is about it, but it's just that it's a ballad, it's a slow one, and it's really reminiscent of the old time for Westlife. It's absolutely fantastic. Similar to My Blood in that aspect, that it's quite similar to the old Forte that Westlife had. Just an excellent track, and I think this one's a definite 9 out of 10. It's a real good one, and might grow on me even more over time. And then we go back to we're on track 7 now. Yes, we are. The first contribution from Mark and Shane in terms of songwriting credits, as well as Purcell and Steve Mack. Yeah, it does have that modern sound, definitely, with the dum 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 dum, and you've got that clicking as well. It seems to be there a lot now, and I'm not a big fan of that, but lyrically it's very good. The lads, again, as I've said for previous tracks, they really shine. They really do shine, and it's clear that it's been nearly 10 years, but their vocals certainly haven't diminished at all. But yeah, I got a bit confused with this one because it features the words, "One last time, won't you take me there?" And that was really confusing when I first listened to the track, because I thought, wait, is this "One last time" or "Take me there"? I got really confused with that. But apart from that, it's good to see Nikki have more of a role here. I think obviously Shane and Mark are the leads really, but Nikki and Kian sometimes have got good qualities as well, and it's good to see them shine in this album as well, and particularly from Nicky Byrne in this track. Then we move on to Repair, which was written by Steve Mack and James Bay's first contributor to the album here. Again, another good artist. I think his biggest track was Hold Back the River. Haven't heard a lot of him since then, but if he's written 10 more hit songs, I apologise. It's not really up with James Bay and that sort of stuff these days. But as I've said before, credit to all the writers, all the sounds, all this tracks sound really slick and very good lyrically. It's a very impressive higher pitch from Mark here. It's really nice to hear a bit of a different side to that, rather than the bog standard sound that you're at the eighth track of the album by now. You want to hear something a little bit different. This is definitely something a little bit different, and it's a great sound. It's a simple formula, which again is very very closely aligned to Westlife's old sound. I think I'm going to give the last 2 tracks an 8 out of 10. Now we move on to a bit of a dud, in my opinion. The 5th and final single for now. They might release more singles. You just never know. This is the 2nd track by James Bay and Steve Mack, and I don't think this one shines as well as the last one does, to be honest. Yeah, it seems a little simple to me. I don't know what it is about it. It just doesn't have the click. It doesn't have the hook that the other tracks do to really entice me. And there's nothing that says about Without You, which is the 9th track, that really pulls me in. It's a tricky one. I think it might be just because it's an initial thing of an initial listen, and perhaps I need to grow into the track a little bit more. I'm not really sure about that, but it's not my favourite track. It's a 6 out of 10 for me, but it's a decent track. It's a decent album track, and I don't think nothing more, but nothing less at the same time. Then we move on to probably the poorest track of the album, in my opinion. And no, it's not a cover of the old Nat King Cole classic. Oh, it was for that, yeah, whatever. Love, or Love. Again, contributions from Mark and Shane in terms of songwriting, and contribution from Camille Purcell, written some of Little Mix's biggest hits, apparently. And Benny Blanco's worked with several big artists as well. You'll probably know these names better than me if you're up in the new music scene, really. But not the best track again. It sounded a little bit poppy to me, with any real grit or meaning. It's just that I don't know what happened in these 2 tracks. I'm not really convinced with them. But they are decent tracks. They're not terrible. They're not awful. But I think we've expected and come to expect, particularly because we've had sort of 8 really good tracks up to now. And it's just disappointing to hear something that's not excellent, that excellent formula once again. But once again, it might just be down to personal taste. But that's going to be a 5 out of 10, which again is just my personal taste. And now we're on to the final track of the album, which is Another Life, written by Charles and Williams. Again, that's their surnames. Never heard of them. And when I searched them on Google, nothing come up. But oh well, it's back to form. It's a really good track. It's a great ballad with Shane and Nikki shining in particular. It's a really good track, and I do like it. And it's glad to see that it is a return to form by the end of the album. I think it'd been a real shame. Pardon me, sorry, if this one was a real dud as well, because you'd be like, we had 8 great tracks and then just filler, which I think 9 and 10 might well be filler, but they might grow on me over time. But overall, after looking at it, and that's an 8 out of 10 as well. overall, after looking at that, I can now reveal that because we've put them all into an average over on TIJ Music, you'll see in this corner now the verdict is 7.5 out of 10, which in my eyes is a pretty good album. In terms of a few notes I've made in terms of an overall review of the album, great vocal performances throughout. I mentioned that earlier. It's fantastic to see these four back to form. As I said, I went to see them live back in June, and they were very good then as well. Although, to my knowledge, not a lot of keying on the lead vocal, which isn't too much of a surprise, but a little bit of a shame. If I've missed something there, let me know, because I've only listened to the album a few times, so I might have missed something, but I couldn't see a lot of keying. Great songwriting, and the additions of James Bay, Ed Sheeran, etc., etc., only enhanced the album. And as I've said, a few duds in there, hence why it's only a 7.5. It's not the perfect album, but it's a very good album nonetheless. And who knows, is it the first of many albums? I know they are doing their Summer in the Stadiums or something like that. That's their 2020 tour. I don't think they'll bring some more albums out. I think that this isn't going to be the end for Westlife, because I know Nicky Byrne said that he didn't think that they'd succeed again. I was going to say concede, that doesn't make any sense. He didn't think that they would succeed again. They really have. I think that a lot of these tracks are going to be radio staples for the next few months. I think that it's a really good album. It's nice to see in my opinion, a lot of the albums, a lot of the tracks today not being fantastic, that you've got someone like Westlife in there, and I think that it's brilliant. I really do think it's a great album. I mean, there's a lot of good tracks in there, and I think it's not one of those that's not just been bought out as a comeback to get money. I think it's truly that these guys saw that the fans wanted something. It's been 9 years away, so they've matured a lot since then. I think that they've got to be in their 40s now, haven't they? I mean, if this is the 20 tour, they've got to be at least late 30s. But that does make a difference, that 9-year gap. I was talking about music has changed. Well, these four have changed as well, and they have done solo work in between 2010 and 2019, and that's also good as well. But ultimately, as with many great bands, they're not as good by themselves. They are much better as a group. But I think that's going to be it for today's review of Spectrum by Westlife. If I've got any more thoughts about the album, I might well compile another video of my other thoughts. But what do you think of the album? What are your initial thoughts of the album? Have you bought the album? And, where do you think it ranks compared to the previous Westlife records, in your opinion? But that's going to be it for today's video. Make sure to subscribe for weekly, or I'll say monthly album reviews, because we've been a little bit inactive over here for the last few months. That's something I want to change. We've got a Westlife concert review here, which you'll see on one of the end screens. We've got more of a rock base here really at the moment with some of the stuff I've got, but I'm going to put a lot more Westlife reviews out there. I think some of the albums I've got, digital copies. I've got physical copies of some of the albums, so I'm going to be reviewing those in the next few months. Definitely subscribe if you want to hear more of that. And there's going to be plenty of album reviews, maybe a top 10 Westlife songs, maybe countering in these songs as well. There might be one or two of these songs in there. Who knows? But that'll be something that'll probably come in the next few months. But if you've enjoyed that, make sure to leave a thumbs up down below. Comment your thoughts. Share this video as well. It's a new review, and I think it would be great if you shared it. Again, a lot more people hear about the album then. I think that it's a great album, and hopefully, fingers crossed, by this time next week, it'll be number one in the charts, which I've got no doubt that it will be. But thank you very much for watching. I've been Toby from TIJ Music, and until the next time, I will see you all later on. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.